Okay.
Buenos días, buenas tardes a todos. Bienvenidos. Mi nombre es Jenna Leana y estoy aquí con mi compañera Alexia, que no tiene acceso a su video, para interpretar este evento entre inglés y español.
Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. My name is Jen Eleana. I am here with my compañera Alexia, who does not have access to her webcam for the day, and we are here to be your interpreters between English and Spanish.
Estamos aquí interpretando usando un marco que se llama la justicia del lenguaje.
We are here interpreting using a framework called language justice.
La justicia del lenguaje incluye el compromiso de la presencia plena de todos y la capacidad de comunicarnos en nuestros idiomas. Reconocemos todos los idiomas presentes hoy aquí y en particular los idiomas de los pueblos indígenas de esta tierra. Los Ángeles es donde estamos Alexia y yo, tierra Tongva no cedida, donde el pueblo e idioma Tongva siguen existiendo en resistencia.
So, a language justice includes a commitment to everyone's full presence and capacity to communicate in our languages. We acknowledge all the languages here today, and especially the languages of the indigenous people of this land. Both Alexia and I are in Los Angeles or unceded Tongva territory, where Tongva people and language continue in resistance.
Este evento hoy es bilingüe en inglés y español y vamos a estar usando la función de interpretación de Zoom. Si usted es bilingüe y se siente cómodo utilizando ambos idiomas, puede dejar apagada la función o puede elegir un canal de idioma a continuación después de que expliquemos cómo.
So today we're going to be using English and Spanish in the conversation. So we're going to be using the Zoom interpreting function. If you are bilingual, you can leave it off, or if not, you can select a language channel and we will explain how in just a second.
La función de interpretación de Zoom ya está encendida, entonces si usted se está conectando con una computadora, verá un icono de un mundo en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Si se está conectando con tableta o teléfono, tiene que pulsar en más o los tres puntitos y verá un menú que incluye la opción de interpretación de idiomas.
So the interpreting tool is already activated. So if you are joining from a computer, you will see a globe icon on the bottom of your screen. If you're joining from a tablet or a smartphone, click on more and you will see a menu that will include an option called language interpretation.
Si usted no puede ver el mundo o la opción de interpretación de idiomas, por favor, póngase en comunicación con Pete para recibir ayuda. Para escuchar la interpretación, pulse el icono del mundo o interpretación de idiomas. A continuación, elija su canal de idioma. Si está usando una tableta o teléfono, asegúrese de hacer clic en finalizar después de escoger su idioma.
If you cannot see the globe or the language interpretation option after the interpreting function or right now, please contact Pete to get tech assistance. To listen to the interpreting, click the globe icon or language interpretation. Then choose your language channel. If you are using a tablet or phone, please make sure to click on done once you choose your language.
Entonces vamos a cambiar después de esta misma frase a la interpretación simultánea y hacer una pequeña prueba de la función de interpretación antes de comenzar el evento.
So before we start the event, we're going to do a quick check to make sure that the interpreting tool is functioning properly. And we're going to do this right now after this sentence. We're going to switch to simultaneous.
Okay, so in this moment, I am speaking English, and I would love to get a thumbs up from Jessica, whose face I can see on the screen, that you can hear Alexia speaking on the Spanish channel. Thank you. Y ahora voy a estar hablando en español, buscando la señal con la cara de Jessica de que pueda escucharle a Alexia excelente en la línea en inglés. Ahora todas las personas que prefieren participar en un solo idioma deben estar en un canal de idioma. También quisiera reconocer que este es un espacio trilingüe con inglés, español y lengua norteamericana de señas con el intérprete Ben haciendo interpretación a la lengua de señas norteamericanas. Usted puede pulsar silenciar audio original para escuchar a la intérprete solamente. Si no puede escuchar a la interpretación, por favor no sufra en silencio, use la caja de chat o contacte a Pete para pedir ayuda. Por último, las personas que entienden español habrán notado que estamos usando la terminación E en vez de la tradicional A u O, por ejemplo, cuando dijimos bienvenides a este espacio. No es un error de pronunciación, sino un esfuerzo intencional de crear espacios inclusivos y evitar hacer asunciones con relación al género. Muchísimas gracias a la Asociación para las Familias Trabajadoras por hacer posible que estemos aquí. Nos da mucho gusto poder apoyar este espacio multilingüe, ya que sentimos una fuerte solidaridad con el trabajo que hacen. Y ahora pueden comenzar el evento oficialmente. Muchísimas gracias.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much. I just want to again reiterate we're going to speak slowly so that everyone can get the interpretation that they need today. So welcome everyone. Today is the National Day of Action for Canceling Utility Debt. And this is all utilities. A lot of us work in the electricity energy field, but this is not just about electricity. This is about broadband. This is about water, gas, whatever other electricities, all the other debts that we have accrued since the shutdown, the pandemic started. So welcome everyone. Just to acknowledge the organizers and the different networks and organizations that are here today, the Energy Democracy Project, Right to the City, Partnership for Working Families, Race Forward, and many, many others. So just really quick, I'm gonna kind of highlight our agenda for today. And there will be somebody, if somebody could add a link to the social media kit and share that with folks, if folks want to tweet, post on Facebook or whatever social media you're on, that would be great. So we will be starting off in a good way with a prayer. We will also have some poetry. Then we will get into our speaker program. We have some amazing folks who are doing all kinds of great work across this nation right now, calling for canceling utility debt. And then we'll recap, and if we have time, we will have a Q&A, and then we'll be closing the event. So without further ado, I would like to welcome very special elder Atabibi Na-niki Ocasio, Reye Ocasio, representing El Boyo and the Grandmothers Council. So I would like to invite her up to say a prayer. Thank you.
I think I hadn't been unmuted. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Before I begin, I'd like to express my gratitude and honor the ancestors of all the lands in which we all find ourselves in. I'd also like to express my gratitude to Jessica for inviting me to open this event, and all of the organizers and everyone here for their presence. This is a very important event. Many of our people continue to struggle, as you well pointed out, with debt related to funeral expenses, exorbitant medical bills, and are really going through, I get a little emotional because I know many people who are going through this. So I just want to express my gratitude for the foresight and the wisdom that you all have had in organizing this very important event. I'd like to begin with the prayer, and it's a prayer inviting the ancestors, creator, the keepers of the four directions to come to hear us, to see that we still continue to carry on our traditions, to guide us, and to let our voices be heard. Hang hang. I yokahu bagwamauro kuti, okamagwariken, okamagwariken busika tiobo guatukang, busikarani guatukang. Guana ho achia no okamagwariken, okamagwariken busika tiobo guatukang, busikarani guatukang. Mukaro koro mo okamagwariken, okamagwariken busika tiobo guatukang, busikarani guatukang. Mukaro raku no okamagwariken busika tiobo guatukang, busikarani guatukang. Sobay ko guaraguao okamagwariken busika tiobo guatukang, busikarani guatukang. Atabei ieya aguana mamona soy maiko okamagwariken busika tiobo guatukang, hang katu bomatu. It is so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Na-niki. And thank you so much for grounding us today and you know, sharing the energy and the wisdom of our grandmothers. One of my favorite people in the whole world was my own grandmother.
Thank you.
So next, well, really quick, I want to just acknowledge, I know there are folks in different parts of the United States, and I wanted to acknowledge that Na-niki was speaking to us from Puerto Rico. So we have folks from all over the US, including Puerto Rico.
Just stop you for one moment.
Yes.
We use the traditional name of our land, which is Boriken, so that we continue to anchor and harness the energy of our ancestors and not of the colonizer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Na-niki. And if folks in this event would like to share, if you know the name of the community of the First Nations people where you're at, please share that in the chat with us so we can acknowledge all the different peoples that are represented here today. And I'm speaking to you from Ramaytush Ohlone, and thank you so much for sharing where you're at. We have folks from all over the United States. Thank you. I would like to invite a member from our youth community. Her name is Michelle Arrango, beautiful young woman who I met from a youth group called The New Voices Are Rising. And she is here to share with us her words in poetry. So I would like to introduce Michelle Arrango from The New Voices Are Rising. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I read this poem last night because I feel like every day my rage just builds at how our communities are being treated. And especially, I just find it super unfair that we even have to, you know, talk about this because it's just insane that we aren't being treated with, like, you know, respect, and like our rights as people are not being met. And so this is new rage and it's called Untitled. There is light at the end of every tunnel. There is warmth behind every embrace. And there is even more behind fires, flames that consume my home, my people. Our money feeds their greed, flames fanning desire, paper currency consumed by fire, bodies kindling, and they are sick, diseased, infected by capitalism, for they value our money over our lives. Screw profit potential, they cut out the middleman, make way to outstretched bills, clutched by the cold, dead hands of my people. Charred bodies and paper money, but it's okay because they take debit or credit. Plastic money made for just us fake people, corporations. And this rage has been built up, passed down from generation to generation, and cultivated within my community against the corporations that cut our water and block the light at the end of our tunnels. Unforgiving, despite trapping us in an endless start. The air is running out, and I can touch the top of this crippling tower of debt, accumulated over years, and it's an endless cycle of debt and greed at the expense of our people and our homes. They burn us with no consequence, persecute us at no expense, withhold our rights, and yet they get bailed out by daddy's money. But when do we get a break? When do we get to breathe? When does that debt forgiveness apply to us? Why do corporations get a pass and my community doesn't? Our debt accumulates and our only crime is being poor, while PG&E is our leading cause of death. The hypocrisy of this all perplexes me. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. We appreciate your words and your wisdom, the wisdom of the youth. So, yeah, everybody, if we could give a clap, a thumbs up, a heart for Michelle. All right. So we're going to get ready to hear from our speakers. Yes, thank you so much. Incredible, Michelle. And the new voices are rising. So glad to have your energy here today. So we have a great list of speakers, amazing activists, organizers, policy people, true change makers fighting for justice. The first person I would like to introduce to you is Gwen Chang. She comes from the California Environmental Justice Alliance, also known as CEJA, doing incredible work for environmental justice communities. So I would like to spotlight Gwen at this moment. Welcome, Gwen.
Thank you. Thanks, Jessica. Hi, everyone. And thank you to all of the people who just opened us up. It's so powerful to always hear from our elders and young poets and organizers and just be reminded that, you know, we're all in this movement together and we all have what we contribute to this creates such like a beautiful movement. I'm Gwen, she, her, hers with the California Environmental Justice Alliance, or CEJA, and I'm on unceded occupied Ohlone land. And CEJA is an alliance of grassroots community-based organizations across California, and we unite the powerful local organizing of our members who are from communities that are most impacted by environmental hazards to help make systemic changes. And we're part of the Reclaim Our Power campaign because we've seen how our communities have been disinvested in, left out of decision-making spaces, while we're left to really be the ones dealing with fires, power outages, health inequities, and of course, the high rates of utility debt that we're seeing within our communities across the states. And so our work is born out of the needs of Black, Indigenous, low-income, migrant, and disabled communities. And these are the folks who know these issues intimately and whose leadership we should be turning to when we're looking for solutions. And so just to ground us in some context of the current moment in California, we now have at least $2 billion in utility debt, which could lead to millions of people being disconnected from life-saving energy. Meanwhile, during all of this, during the pandemic, PG&E has continued to raise their rates. Their top executives have more than doubled their salaries, and they're continuing to make massive profits, while typical people, low-income people, the people within our communities are struggling through this time. And on top of all of this too, California is facing one of the most severe droughts of this year. We know that EJ communities or environmental justice communities will be cut off from power again, and fires will spark, and our energy system won't be resilient enough to stand up to this. And we don't feel safe with our status quo as it is now. And so that's what we're kind of, I think utility debt is part of this whole narrative around energy that we're really kind of fighting and trying to shift, with just the core belief that energy and water are human rights and should be accessible to everyone during the pandemic, after the pandemic, all of the time. And so Ceja and Reclaim Our Power really support a complete utility debt relief proposal and a suite of strategies to kind of help move us forward in that way. We want to extend the moratoriums, at least, you know, we want to continue extending them, and we want to urge the CPUC to extend that in their upcoming meeting, which if folks want to come out, organize with us, there will be a link to that. And we want to make sure that debt is canceled for everyone, prioritizing environmental justice communities. And we want the shareholders, not the ratepayers, to be the ones picking up the tab. They've been the ones profiting. And so it's time for them to kind of pay up. We also want to remember that there's folks in public utility areas. And so wanting to make sure that this debt relief is extended to them as well, and want to create a process that's easy and expedient, and doesn't place additional barriers on people getting this relief. All of this is just some steps that we can take towards our effort of canceling PG&E and really setting a new precedent for a model outside of our current utility paradigm, one that we envision being safe, affordable, worker and community controlled in this new energy system that really puts the value of people in our community over the value of corporate profit. So I think we'll be dropping a link. So if you would like to join Reclaim Our Power in our upcoming action at the CPUC, you can do that. And also, I think we'll be sharing out our social media kit so you can continue helping to amplify this message. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, Gwen. I appreciate you speaking with everyone today and letting everyone know the great work that you're doing, and highlighting that the moratorium in California is set to lift the end of this month, and that we're doing all we can to extend that and fight for utility debt forgiveness. And just to note that, you know, our communities have been struggling before the pandemic. The pandemic has actually made that struggle a whole lot harder and worse. So I would like to introduce our next speaker, a wonderful woman, Chandra Farley, who I've known for some time, who is with the Partnership for Southern Equity. This woman is a force to be reckoned with. So I bring to you Ms. Chandra Farley.
Thanks so much, Jessica. Absolutely one of my favorite people, and someone who I count on to continue to learn from in this work. Yes, I'm the Just Energy Director at the Partnership for Southern Equity, where I lead our energy equity and climate justice work. We're a racial equity organization based in what is now known as Atlanta, Georgia. It's the ancestral lands of the Muskogee Creek Nation, and I honor my ancestors, many who were forcibly brought to these lands. So I want to thank you, Jessica, everyone that is here today, who continue to work night and day to make sure that this issue of utility shutoffs finally gets the attention, outrage, and solutions that it needs. I always like to bring the South, into these conversations. The South is a region that has been laid bare by the racial, economic, and class inequities due to the legacy of slavery. And these societal barriers have hampered the opportunity for Black communities, communities of color, rural and low wealth communities to lend their perspective, not only to the shaping of their clean energy future, but to have the resources, the capacity to raise their voice against the avalanche of issues of utility debt. And focusing on just energy, that is our framework for advancing energy equity, which we define as the fair distribution of the benefits and burdens of energy production and consumption. We focus on relationship strategies like community organizing that build the kind of civic power that we need to push back on exactly what we are talking about today. So I'm always honored to be in the company of so many activists and organizers that understand it is the people who are first and most impacted by an issue that have the solutions and need to be leading these calls to action. And we know that the coronavirus pandemic and resulting economic fallout triggered unemployment levels unprecedented, right, in our modern American history. My home state of Georgia was one of the hardest hit states in the nation. And at one point, our unemployment benefits filings accounted for over 30% of our workforce. And African Americans accounted for 52% of the deaths in a state that is nearly 31% Black. So to juxtapose that with the findings from the housing precarity and the COVID pandemic study that a nationwide utility shutoff moratorium could have prevented nearly 15% of COVID deaths, we have to ask ourselves, what is happening? What must we continue to do to shift the tide from these investor-owned monopoly utilities? No one should be surprised that the statistics from the pandemic, and as you said, Jessica, the pandemic just exacerbated and amplified all the things that we already knew. Disproportionate impacts on Black communities and communities of color, and so many marginalized by low wages for their essential work. This essential work made up the front lines of keeping us safe and sheltered during the pandemic. These families were already and continued to face disconnection threats and unaffordable rates for utility services that were essential for our survival in the crisis. But again, we can go back to 2017 and thank groups like the NAACP for shining a light on this crisis in their Lights Out in the Cold report. So here we are, June 2021. It's just over a year ago that so many of us took up this fight to call for a national moratorium on utility shutoffs. The Partnership for Southern Equity, I think it was Kismet or Serendipity or whatever, that one of the last people I saw on one of my last trips was my friend Jean Sue at the Center for Biological Diversity. And I came back to Atlanta, talked to her, and then Johanna, Democracy Collaborative, Food and Water Watch, Free Press Action, Corporate Accountability, coming together with over 1,500 utility justice, environmental, faith, civil rights, and labor groups. At that time, in sending 2 letters to Congress calling for a national moratorium, there have been multiple letters. And I think what's important to point out in that all of this outreach to Congress and all of this outreach to our leadership, it has always been about, let's do what we must do to attack the acute issue of shutoffs, which is a symptom, right? But let's also do what we need to make sure that we are taking the kind of action we need to take to talk about a just recovery, finally delivering on the promise of clean energy and what we know the promise of clean energy can deliver for marginalized communities who have been marginalized by the clean energy transition, but have the opportunity to benefit the most. It was also 1 year ago that this country was reawakening to the violence of police brutality resulting in the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and reminded us of Eric Garner, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, and countless others known and unknown. We were inundated by promises and commitments to diversity, inclusion, and racial equity. Many of those commitments came from the same monopoly utilities who were and are still inflicting an unsustainable and unnecessary level of energy violence on their customers. What is the point of this trauma? The despair that comes with the millions of disconnection notices every month. Georgia was one of the first states to reopen and one of the first to resume our shutoffs in the hottest month of the year, not just in Georgia. It's already hot down here. We're already using a lot of AC. It's why I'm wearing headphones, because mine is so loud. But to keep this issue at the forefront of racial equity and energy justice conversations, our Just Energy organizers, along with our Just Energy Coalition partners, created the People's PSC campaign, and We the Plug Though, which was designed to educate our residents on the role of the Public Service Commission and to place pressure on the energy companies and the commissioners themselves who are making these decisions every single day. They have the power in their hands to stop these practices. Our Southern Company Utility CEO had his salary doubled in the year prior to the COVID pandemic. 1/3 of his salary alone could have wiped out all of the past due bills for that we were facing. So this isn't about the money. This is about the political will. So I'm very excited about the many activist representatives that we now have in Congress, like Representative Cori Bush, Jamal Bauman, Representative Tlaib, so many others who are taking this fight from our local public service commissions, from our local electric membership cooperative boards, from our local municipal utility boards to Congress to say, cancel this debt. Let's do something about these shutoffs. Let's do something about these unaffordable bills. So looking forward to joining in on the call to action and being a bridge from that state to federal action with so many that are here today.
Thank you so much, Chandra, for uplifting that, utility debt is a racial justice issue here in the United States, and for all the work you're doing to really fight that. I would like to introduce our next speaker. We have Beth Pauley, Climate and Energy Project. Beth is amazing. We work together in the Energy Democracy Project Network. And so I would like to shine the light on Beth. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Jessica. It is so great to be here with everyone today. As Jessica said, my name is Beth Pauley. I am a program director with Climate and Energy Project. We call ourselves CEP for short. I'm calling in from the Kansas City metropolitan area today, and I'm on the ancestral lands of the Kickapoo Territory. CEP is a Kansas-based nonprofit driving practical solutions for an equitable transition to a clean energy future. As Jessica said, CEP has been collaborating with national organizations like the Energy Democracy Project through our REAMP network, as well as local grassroots organizations over the last year to advocate for utility protections, including a moratorium on disconnects during the pandemic. We strongly believe that we cannot pursue a just transition while so many of our Kansans are struggling. We are here today in solidarity with all of you, with groups like you. We are also here in solidarity with many of our local groups who have been leading the pandemic response. To name a few, I would like to give some shouts out to KC tenants, housing activists who stopped pandemic evictions in Kansas City, Build Power MoCan and their allies who have won many utility protections. The Kansas Poor People's Campaign has held multiple assemblies calling on lawmakers to prioritize the poor and dispossessed. Clean Air Now and Wyandotte County Mutual Aid have been organizing around impacted folks in Kansas City, Kansas. Our local Sunrise Kansas City chapter has been organizing for mutual aid for the utility crisis, and organizations like Kansas Appleseed, Kansas Interfaith Action, the Sierra Club, Moms Out Front, Rent Zero Kansas were among the groups advocating the hardest for increased protections, to name a few. Here in Kansas and Missouri, we had minimum protections. Our utility moratoria expired over a month ago, so we can give a preview to how severe this crisis is when a moratorium is not in place. We have heard many terrible stories. Not only have utilities gone back to shutting people's power off, they have eliminated any type of flexibility, or what they think of as flexibility, that they were offering during the pandemic, which was not anywhere near flexible enough to begin with. We have heard many cases of customers who are in thousands of dollars of debt being confronted with upwards of $900, $1,000, $1,200 to keep their electricity on, or to get their electricity turned back on. This is about a third to half of their bill. Not only that, but the assistance programs that Evergy and the Kansas City Board of Utilities have been referring people to through both the state of Kansas and the city of Kansas City, Missouri, are very backed up. These funds are not being administered quickly enough to even make a dent for what people need. We need much more meaningful relief at the federal level. We need a debt cancellation. It is not fair to expect people who are already working on the front lines of this pandemic, who are bearing the greatest brunt of this crisis. And as many people have so well said, we're struggling to pay utility bills. We're struggling to pay rent since before the pandemic hit our communities. We need much more meaningful action to address the severity of this crisis. I do want to ground ourselves here in Kansas. Here in Kansas, nowhere did this crisis happen in a vacuum, and it especially did not happen in a vacuum here in Kansas or Missouri. Kansas lacks energy efficiency programs and has higher utility costs than our neighboring states. To be specific, we are at the very, very bottom of utility funded energy efficiency programs. I should say 47th out of 50. The combination of high electricity rates, more extreme temperatures, a lack of policies and programs that conserve energy to lower utility bills has created a recipe for disaster, putting our most vulnerable Kansans at risk. We are still 5 days away from the first day of summer on the calendar, and we are already experiencing 100-degree temperature days. By the way, Kansas does not have a hot weather rule to outlaw shutoffs in extreme heats. The problems are daunting. What is clear is that we cannot address this crisis with the same solutions proposed by the people who are far removed from the crisis on the front lines. We need a rapid, just transition to the clean energy future. And the first step is eliminating the debt, reconnecting people's power here in Kansas and Missouri, and halting the disconnections. Long-term activists who are here today, the grassroots organizations and organizers who we have stood in solidarity with, need a decision-making role at the table to co-create equitable energy policies in Kansas and Missouri. I am very passionate about energy efficiency because of the potential that it holds in terms of addressing a wide variety of social justice issues. The energy efficiency policies have not been administered equitably, and they have not been implemented equitably to address the housing crisis, to address the energy crisis. And that needs to change. That is crystal clear. Right now, energy efficiency thinks of businesses first, thinks of affluent homeowners first with the capital to invest in upgrades, with low-income homeowners and renters second. This has to change. Distributed generation, also known as rooftop solar, community-owned solar, are additional pieces to the puzzle that lower utility bills. However, many barriers need to be removed in order for these solutions to be widely available. The CEP staff and I look forward to moving and building with everybody on this call at the national level, at the regional level. We got involved in this work through our membership with REAMP and are eager to assemble our Kansas Wealth State Table with activists, organizers, and organizations to put people first in our energy policy. I'm really, really proud to stand here with all of you today. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Beth, for highlighting, the struggle of low-income communities, communities of color, and the legacy of disinvestment, right? Because that's what we're talking about. This is about housing. This is about jobs. This is about utilities, basic human rights. Okay, I would love to introduce our next speaker, Johanna Bozuwa. And she's been doing some amazing work on a national level, calling for this debt forgiveness and really urging our decision makers to pay attention to this issue. So Johanna, please, thank you.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you so much for inviting me here today. It's been to hear from so many folks on this call who are in the trenches. It's extremely powerful, and what compels me at the federal level to continue fighting for and alongside our folks who are on the ground actively. So I'm Johanna Bozuwa, and I work at the Democracy Collaborative, and I am currently here speaking from occupied Ocasio territory. I have been spending over a year with many of you fighting for a national moratorium on utility shutoffs, and now to cancel utility debt as the moratoria across the country start to lift too early from many of our perspectives for electricity, broadband, and water. These are absolutely human rights. They should be treated as such. And instead, what we have seen is students without access to internet when trying to do school from home. We're seeing families not having access to running water and having power shut off. One of my colleagues who's been working with us from the internet side, from Free Press Action, Dana Floberg, talks about how she's heard of people who don't have access to internet to go to their eviction hearings because they have had their internet shut off. They don't even have the ability to protect themselves and to fight for their home because they don't have access to internet and to the other utilities as well. So, and to give you just a concept of the scale of this issue, which we've heard in so much depth from the different states represented and communities represented by Chandra, Beth, and Gwen, but a new report from the Center for Biological Diversity found that in just 17 states, utilities have performed over 1 million household shutoffs since the COVID pandemic was declared a national emergency in March 2020. That is a huge number of families without access to these essential services. And Georgia, where Chandra has been working and fighting so hard, they have in Georgia reported disconnects equivalent to 8% of their customers. And so as we have been fighting for a year, now that these moratoria are lifting, we are seeing the exposure of the crushing debt. And so that is what we have now organized ourselves alongside all of you, working to make sure that utility debt is canceled. Low-end estimates for utility debt in the United States are $28 billion as of March 2021, according to the National Energy Assistance Directors Association. So though it has been a long fight, we also have had folks at the federal level who have been willing to throw down with us, including Representative Tlaib and Senator Merkley. And with their support, we have actively intervened many times and now have put forward a new bill called the Maintaining Access to Essential Services Act that actively cancels utility debt for water, energy, and broadband. And in this moment of such a tight 50-50 split in the Senate, this is a reconcilable bill, which means that it can get through if we as Democrats and as activists working to fight have the guts to do it. This would provide direct relief that so many folks across the country need. This would also require a moratoria on utility shutoffs, late fees, and selling consumer-owned utility debt to debt collectors, something we're consistently seeing expand. So that is why we are asking members of Congress to co-sponsor the Maintaining Access to Essential Utilities Act today and pass it in our infrastructure package. Again, I have just a huge amount of respect for Representatives Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, Rashida Tlaib, Senator Merkley, for the work that they have done to elevate this issue to the federal level, to the national level, to take these stories that we are hearing and the ones that they have experienced personally from their communities and make it a real issue at the federal level. And that is also due to the work of so many people on this call, on this panel with me, and on the folks who are listening in right now. This would not be an issue at the federal level, if not for the rising up of so many communities fighting for utility justice. And because it cannot be said enough, I will end by saying that this is an acute experience of a chronic condition in the United States. We need to tackle the root cause of this racist extractive system that socializes losses for corporations, but piles debt onto us and onto our communities. We need really transformative change that is going to shift the paradigm away from this. And we are seeing folks like Rep. Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman saying that we actually should own our power. We need to actually transform this. So as we go into these infrastructure fights, we are going to fight so that folks have canceled utility debt and are not being shut off, and that we are investing in that transformative infrastructure package instead of something that's skinny and will not support our communities on the ground. So please, if you have a member of Congress that you are interested in reaching out to, this is a crucial fight as we move forward in the infrastructure package. I thank you, Jessica, and to all of my other folks on the phone here. I'm so grateful to be in this fight with you all and in community with you all.
Thank you so much, Johanna. I really appreciate your leadership and definitely garnering support from our government to pay attention to this issue and to lead in that sector to address this critical issue at this time. I would like to ask if there are any questions. It would be great to put those in the chat. We don't have time to answer all the questions, but I would like to get a list of questions and answer what we can today. So please put your questions in the chat. If there are any questions from folks who are attending. I know there are also members of our different organizations, members from the press. Thank you. It looks like Johanna put in a petition that we need folks to sign. So please click that and make sure you sign that petition calling for federal action. Are there any questions so far? Okay. All right. Well, if there aren't any questions, I would like to highlight, if there are members of the press, for example, maybe if we can get them to email directly. I think Pete's email, I'm going to put it out there, pete@localcleanenergy.org. Members of the press, please contact Pete at localcleanenergy.org. Thank you. Let's see. Any questions in the chat? I think we have somebody who raised their hand. Amy, if you have a question, please put it in the chat. So I don't see if there are any questions, but anybody who is monitoring the chat, if you see anything, please. Okay. Can speakers talk about some opportunities or success stories reaching out and organizing with those who are experiencing utility shutoffs? Closest to the problem, closest to the solution. Would anybody like to address this question? Maybe one person.
I'd be happy to talk about that, how our organizers, we're organizing is about relationships. So we was in a situation where, oh my gosh, coronavirus started and we started fighting back on utility shutoff issues, and we had to try to run out and partner with we had a base of people that we have been building relationships for a long time. Some of those from our last, I mentioned in Georgia, our Public Service Commission and investor-owned utility goes through what we call the Integrated Resource Plan every 3 years. And so 3 years ago, there were people standing with us to push back on their proposals to raise rates. Right. And so in between those times, we have what is called a Just Energy Academy. And this is all about bringing community folks, existing community leaders, young people into partnership with us to learn about what we're talking about when we talk about just energy. They learn Energy Policy 101, energy regulation, environmental justice, leadership skills, organizing skills. And so that is what it looks like to bring people who, and many of these people were reached out to. We were able to connect them with reporters. We're able to connect them and with legislators to tell their stories of what it looks like. We have a mom that's been doing organizing for years around like student and parent engagement and is consistently speaking out on many of our like listening tours to tell her story about ways she's trying to save energy and needing help with her broadband bill with, a few children trying to go to school, like keeping everybody in one room. So they only have to keep, the lights on and things like that, just in one room of the house and everybody's. So all of these stories and personal stories, you want to be careful not to be extractive, which is something we really, really face, like not just, hey, talk to this person, but when you're in relationship with people and you're building this base of trust and trust, respect, and partnership and being in the fight together, that is what it really looks like for us and for me to be in partnership with those who are closest to the problem. And can offer really great energy saving tips for moms with kids, but can also stand up in front of the Public Service Commission and say, this is how this is impacting me. This is what you can do about it because we have done that learning together. And this is how I expect you to do something about it.
Thank you so much, Chandra. We do have another question, a real issue that we're dealing with. So the question is, here in Butte County, California, PG&E, the utility, is threatening to shut off power. It is expected to be 115 degrees tomorrow. How can we prevent this? That is a great question. And do any one of our speakers want to speak to that? I don't know if Gwen wants to speak to that briefly. Maybe mention some of the work that we're doing with Reclaim Our Power. So maybe I'll address that really quick. Yeah, this is a huge, huge problem. You know, we've been advocating, my organization is also part of Reclaim Our Power Utility Justice. We've been advocating for islandable solar, battery storage, microgrid technology so that we can keep the power on when PG&E shuts our power off abruptly. And what they're doing in California is because they've caused huge mega wildfires that are literally killing people and burning up the state, the response of the utilities to abruptly shut off power, supposedly to prevent additional fires, but it's not working. They're leaving people literally without power to live. Meanwhile, the fires are still happening, and this is from their transmission wire infrastructure, which is old. They don't maintain it. We found out a lot of money they're actually funneling into CEO, bonuses instead of actually managing their infrastructure. So this is why a lot of us are fighting for our own clean energy solutions in our communities locally, so we don't rely on that volatile old transmission wire system that's also very costly. We get charged for that in our bills, right? Okay, and there are other comments that we don't have time to address, but just to acknowledge, yes, these utilities are driving a wedge between different communities and really trying to run away with this narrative that if people have solar here, then poor people over there are going to have to subsidize their solar. And the reality is we all need that resilience in our communities. And who's actually raising our bills? Who's benefiting from cost shifting? Who's doing the cost shifting? It's the utilities, right? So I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. I'm sorry that we are out of time, but just to reiterate, our communities have been through enough and way too much, right? We're surviving as best we can this global pandemic. We've experienced job loss, sickness, death, and all the grief that comes from that. Utilities are a human right. We need to cancel utility debt now and really make sure that we're not adding harm to people who have already been injured enough. This is across the United States and even across, the rest of the world, right? So my final words to you is clean power to the people. Thank you so much. Please enjoy your day. Please sign the petition, take action, share this through your media channels, with your communities, with your members. And most importantly, let's put pressure on our decision makers. We shouldn't have to bear the brunt of this pandemic and the fact that we've had leadership that didn't do their job. Thank you very much.